Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be exploring the work of Johannes Sharpe, a 14th century philosopher who has some really big questions about how we understand the world. Almost like we're about to read a philosophical detective novel, you know?
Right.
We've got our source, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy entry on Sharpe, and we're going to try to piece together his theories, which are pretty fascinating and sometimes pretty mind-bending, to be honest. But luckily, I've got our expert here to help us make sense of it all.
Well, it's certainly going to be a journey. What makes Sharpe so interesting is that he was part of this group. They were called the Oxford Realists.
Okay.
And they were right in the thick of this huge debate that's been going on for centuries, really.
Right.
Realism versus nominalism.
Realism versus nominalism. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a pretty major philosophical showdown. Can you break that down for us a little? What was at stake in that debate?
Sure. So imagine you're looking at a room full of chairs.
Okay.
They're all different, right?
Yeah.
Different shapes, sizes, colors, but we still call them all chairs. Yeah.
So the question is there some kind of essence of chairness that exists out there in the world that unites all these individual chairs? Or is chairness just a name, a convenient label we use for these objects? And that is really the heart of the realism versus nominalism debate.
Ah, I see. So it's about whether these universal concepts, like chairness or humanity or justice, whether they have a real existence out there in the world, or if they're just something we've made up, mental constructs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Sharpe, as an Oxford realist, he was on the side of realism. He thought these universals had real existence. But his approach was, well, let's just say it wasn't exactly straightforward. He didn't just take the traditional realist stance. Instead, he really dug into language and how it connects to reality. In fact, his work, Quaesio Super Universalia, which we're going to be looking at today, is a deep dive into this very question.
Interesting. So instead of starting with, say, the nature of reality itself, he's starting with how we talk about it.
Yeah.
It's like he's saying language holds the key to understanding, to unlocking the mysteries of existence. Precisely. He was really, he was a very careful observer of language, meticulously analyzing how we use words to express general concepts. The Stanford Encyclopedia entry actually highlights his 6 types of general expressions,
Oh, wow.
which range from those that directly signify a common nature, all the way to those that don't actually refer to anything real, like void. He even tackles those tricky second intentions. Those are words that refer to concepts, not to things.
Right.
And those were causing quite a stir in philosophical circles at the time.
I bet. So he's not just accepting these traditional categories. He's really dissecting language,
Yeah.
teasing apart how words function, all the nuances. I'm guessing that this approach probably led him to some pretty interesting insights.
Oh, absolutely. By looking at how words function, he was able to shed light on the structure of reality itself.
Wow.
So, for example, his analysis of the word white, he argued that it doesn't actually mean whiteness, literally, but it evokes the concept in our minds. And this kind of analysis allowed him to explore how language shapes our understanding of the world, even when it doesn't perfectly mirror reality.
I see. So it's not just about whether universals exist, but how we access them,
Yeah.
how they become part of our thinking through language.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that brings us to one of Sharpe's most fascinating and challenging ideas, his exploration of identity. In Quaestio Super Universalia, he poses this question: how can something be both the same and different?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Makes you think, how can I be both a unique individual and also a part of this bigger category of humanity? How did he answer that?
Right, it seems like a paradox. Well, this
Wow.
is where his theory of real identity and formal distinction comes in.
Okay.
He argued that a universal, like humanity, is fundamentally the same as its individuals, like you and me, in terms of its real existence.
All right.
But it also has these distinct properties that make it a universal. It's something that goes beyond any one individual.
So it's like a blueprint and a building, right?
Okay.
The blueprint contains that essential form of the building, but each building is a unique instance of that form. They're the same, they share the same essence, but they're also different.
That's a great analogy. And Sharpe takes us even further by exploring what he calls the principle of individuation. So how do we become these unique beings while we share common traits? He's suggesting that there's this kind of dynamic interplay between the universal and the individual, a sort of dance between sameness and difference.
It's a pretty complex idea, but I'm starting to see how he's bringing together language, reality, and identity. He's not just interested in these abstract categories. He's trying to understand how they shape our individual experience.
Exactly. And what makes Sharpe so interesting is that he doesn't shy away from that complexity. He really carefully examines different perspectives, acknowledges the strengths and weaknesses of each argument. He makes you think about the nature of identity and what makes each of us unique, but also connected to something bigger.
Yeah. That's what I love about these deep dives.
Yeah.
They challenge us to re-examine what we think we know about the world
Yeah,
and our place in it. And it sounds like Sharpe was a master at that,
absolutely.
pushing those boundaries.
He was. And in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to look at how he puts those philosophical muscles to work. He examines 8 different opinions on universals.
Oh, wow.
It's like a philosophical trial,
Okay.
with some of history's greatest minds making their case.
Okay, I'm hooked. I can't wait to hear what he has to say about those viewpoints. It's like we have front row seats to one of the greatest philosophical debates. So stay tuned, everyone, because this deep dive is just getting started.
Okay, so we were just talking about how Johannes Sharpe had a pretty unique approach to this whole idea of universals. I mean, he really got into the nitty-gritty of language,
But
right?
we're really breaking it down.
But he didn't stop there.
Okay.
In his Quaestio Super Universalia, he actually looks at 8 different viewpoints on this debate.
8. Wow, that's a lot to keep track of.
It is. It's like he put universals on trial. Really wanted to be thorough. Consider every angle.
So who are some of the main thinkers that he's bringing into this philosophical courtroom?
Oh, he brought out the big names.
Okay.
You got Buridan taking that nominalist stance, saying universals are just names. Then there's Plato, representing the realists, claiming that universals are these eternal, unchanging forms existing out there, independent of the physical world. And of course, you can't forget Wycliffe. He was a big influence on Sharpe, with his own take on realism.
Wow, it's like a philosophical all-star team,
It is.
each with their own perspective.
Yeah.
How did Sharpe even manage to make sense of all these different viewpoints? I mean, it seems like it'd be easy to get lost in the weeds.
Well, what I really admire about Sharpe is his intellectual honesty.
Yeah.
He doesn't just dismiss these other views. He really carefully considers each argument, breaks down their logic, points out the strengths, the weaknesses. You can see his mind at work, weighing the evidence, really trying to get to the truth of it all.
So he wasn't just trying to, win points in a debate. He was searching for something more.
Exactly.
Yeah. Did he ultimately agree with any one viewpoint in particular?
Well, as you might expect, as an Oxford realist, he ends up defending realism.
Okay.
But it's not just a simple, straightforward acceptance of traditional realist ideas. He brings his own, unique twist to the table, drawing on his analysis of language, his theory of real identity, and formal distinction.
Right, so he's not just repeating what other realists have said.
Yeah.
He's taking all these ideas, putting them together, creating something new. What did his version of realism look like?
Well, the Stanford Encyclopedia entry says that Sharpe believed that universal forms actually exist in individual things.
Okay.
So they're not separate, abstract entities floating out there in some other realm. They're right here, embedded in the world around us.
So it's like the blueprint is actually within the building itself. It's not just a representation, but a part of its very being. That's pretty different from that traditional Platonic view of forms.
It is, and it raises some interesting questions about the relationship between the universal and the individual. I mean, if universals are in individual things, does that mean that each individual thing is like a tiny version of the universe, containing the seeds of all these universal forms?
That's a pretty wild thought.
It is.
It's like he's saying that we're all these mini universes, but also connected to everything else.
Exactly. And it challenges the way we usually think about the world, right? We think about universals as these abstract categories existing apart from the things they represent.
Right, right.
But Sharpe is grounding them in the concrete, the everyday.
It's like he's saying that the universal isn't this distant, unattainable thing. It's right here in our lives.
Exactly. And that leads us to another fascinating aspect of Sharpe's work, his exploration of psychology, the theory of knowledge. How do we come to understand these universal forms, he says, are embedded in the world?
So he's not just thinking about whether universals exist, but how our minds grasp them.
Yeah, he's drawing on all these different thinkers, Aquinas, Scotus, even a bit of Occam. But one thing that stands out is that he rejects Averroes' idea of a single intellect for all humans.
So no hive mind then?
No. Each of us has our own individual intellect, able to understand these universal forms
Right.
in our own way.
Yeah.
And Sharpe thought that to understand universals, we need what he called intelligible species, basically mental representations of these forms.
So it's like our minds create these models, these blueprints, to make sense of the universal aspects of reality.
Right.
We're building up this internal library of concepts, using our experiences to understand what it means to be human, to be good, to be beautiful, all of that.
That's a great way to put it. And it's pretty amazing considering this was centuries before modern cognitive science. You can see echoes of his ideas and how we understand mental models today, how our brains work. It's like he was laying the groundwork.
It's incredible to see how these ideas have lasted through time, how they've influenced thinkers across centuries.
It really is. Sharpe's work shows how powerful philosophical inquiry can be.
Yeah.
He was wrestling with questions that are just as important today. And his insights, they still make us think deeply about ourselves and the world.
This whole conversation is really making me think, if Sharpe is right, and these universal forms are in each of us, what does that say about the importance of every person? It's like he's saying that each individual life is this unique expression of something much bigger.
That's a deep question.
It is.
And one that I think Sharpe would have appreciated. He was very concerned with what it means to be an individual,
Yeah.
but also part something larger.
And it seems like his work is still prompting us to ask those questions.
It is.
His ideas about language, reality, identity, they're so rich, they still speak to us today.
Absolutely. And in the last part of our deep dive, we're going to look at another side of Sharpe's work, his commentary on Aristotle's physics, where he gets into some fundamental questions about motion, causality, even atoms.
Wow, sounds like we're going even deeper.
We are. Okay, I can't wait. Okay, so we've been talking about Johannes Sharpe, this 14th century philosopher who really wasn't afraid to tackle some really big questions, about language, reality, the human mind.
Right.
And now we're going to dig into a whole other side of his work in natural philosophy.
Yeah, Sharpe wasn't just a metaphysician.
Right.
He was also really interested in the natural world.
Yeah.
And his commentary on Aristotle's physics shows us just how wide-ranging his thinking was.
I have to say, when I saw he'd written on the physics, I was pretty intrigued. We've been talking about these abstract concepts like universals, identity, language.
Right.
What kind of things did he look at in his natural philosophy?
Well, he really grappled with some pretty fundamental questions about the physical world, like what is motion, how does causality work, what is matter made of? Those are the kind of things he was interested in.
So he was trying to understand the basic rules of the universe.
It's like he's taking that same analytical approach he used with language.
Yeah.
And applying it to the world around us.
Exactly. And what's amazing is how he brings together this deep understanding of Aristotle with his own original insights. He's not just repeating what Aristotle said, he's really engaging with the ideas,
Yeah.
offering his own interpretation.
So I'm curious how he tackled these questions. Did he make any discoveries that seem ahead of his time?
Well, one thing that really stands out is his discussion of atomism. And this is, remember, centuries before modern atomic theory.
Wow, so he was already thinking about the building blocks of matter way back then.
He was. He considers all these different arguments for and against the existence of atoms. He looks at Democritus, the ancient atomists, and then Aristotle, who rejected that whole idea.
So he's really, weighing the evidence, trying to figure it out.
Yeah, he's not just taking sides. He wants to get to the truth.
Does he ultimately agree with the atomists?
Well, actually, he rejects atomism.
Oh, well.
But his reasoning is really interesting. He argues that if matter could be divided infinitely, then motion wouldn't be possible.
Wait, hold on. How does he connect those two things? The divisibility of matter and motion?
Well, he says that if an object was made of an infinite number of tiny parts, to move, all those parts would have to move at the same time.
Yeah.
And he says that would take an infinite force, which is impossible.
Ah, I see. So he's saying that the very idea of motion breaks down if matter is infinitely divisible.
Right. It's like he's using logic to set limits on what can physically happen.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
And it shows that even when he's studying nature, Sharpe is thinking about these deep philosophical issues. He's not just describing how things work. He wants to understand the fundamental principles behind it all.
It's like he's showing us that philosophy isn't just some abstract thing.
Right.
It's actually really relevant to understanding the world around us, even the physical world.
Exactly. And Sharpe's work really shows the power of philosophy to help us understand all parts of human experience, from language and identity to the laws of physics.
As we've been doing this deep dive into Sharpe, I've been really struck by his curiosity, his willingness to tackle these huge questions, push the boundaries of what we know. What do you think we can learn from someone like Sharpe today?
I think one of the biggest things is the value of intellectual humility.
Hmm,
He never shied away from tough questions, from different viewpoints. He was always open to other perspectives, admitting when he didn't know something.
that's so important, especially these days. It's easy to get stuck in our own opinions, dismiss ideas we don't agree with. Sharpe reminds us that searching for truth means being open-minded, being willing to deal with complex ideas.
And he also shows us that learning is a journey, not a destination. He was always questioning, exploring, refining his thinking. And that's something we should all try to do. Keep learning, keep growing.
This whole deep dive has been a journey for me. I feel like I've learned so much about how connected everything is, how these ideas from so long ago are still relevant today, and I'm really glad you were here to guide us through it all.
It's been my pleasure. Sharp is one of those thinkers who just keeps you coming back. There's always more to discover.
And for everyone listening, I encourage you to keep exploring Sharpe's ideas too. Read his work, think about the questions he asked, and see where your own journey takes you.